Well, hello and welcome to OGD VODCAST number 10. This one is called GD Tarot. I'm Martin Thibeault and I'm here with Pat Zalewski. We're in his home in Cairns, Australia. It's November 2022 and let's get right into it. So, Eliphas Lévy, the French writer, said that, or he often spoke so highly of the tarot that he essentially made it to be the sort of the great arcanum, the synthesis of everything in the great work. Now we know that the tarot has a playing cards aspect, a basic divinatory aspect, but within the GD it took on a whole other realm of symbolism and inner meaning. And so my first question to you is, how important of a role does the tarot play in the Golden Dawn system?
Well, very. You have to understand the tarot is not just something that they just put on an altar and say, go through. The actual tarot in the GD, the first was, the important parts was, you go through the pathwork of the trumps in ritual, and that is a colloquy of what is represented in the card through the image. And that includes how the officers stand, what they say, what they do, and the imagery itself, which is presented in forms of diagrams. So that's the first part. The second thing is painting the tarot card, which is a sort of a Zen meditational aspect, not quite, but getting there, where you actually paint the thing to integrate with the tarot and make it very familiar with your psyche to a certain extent. The other lot is divination, where you divine something for what you want, and the fourth one is meditation. So when you have those four elements combined within the GD as a primary aspect, things work well. Of course, there are subgroups from that again, such as alchemy and the tarot and astrology and the tarot and things along those particular lines. But primarily, when in ritual, when you're brought in to the path, when you become Lord of the Path in Golden Dawn, you're shown the tarot cards, which is the combined essence of everything you've done on that particular path, and presenting you all of those meditational, ritualistic frames and things along those particular lines. You've presented that in some form of an image, and the image itself is something that triggers within your psyche to what you want to do.
Now we know some of the main influences on the GD, the GD deck and its symbolism derived from Oswald Wirth. A lot of the French sort of tarot influence through Papus, and obviously the Marseille deck and those types of influences coming from France. But there's some important changes that happen in the GD, especially when it comes to how it's associated with different parts of the system, like the reversal of the Justice card and the Strength card in the numbering system. That became the true and genuine attribution of the tarot cards, which itself had a huge impact on all the decks that followed after that. Some decided to adopt it, some didn't. And then when it comes to the cards themselves, the designs, there's some of the cards, for example, in the Falcon influence that vastly differed, right, from the traditional decks, where we have the lovers completely changed in symbolism, or not necessarily symbolism, but in the pictorial display, and of course the Fool card and a variety of other changes that happened. Do you want to address some of these changes, why they're important, and sort of where they fall into the GD system?
If I start there, I'm going to have to go right back to the very beginning. Now, the Golden Dawn Tarot, Tony Fuller was going through the archives, as he used to do quite on a regular basis, and he came across this paper, and on this paper was the original breakdown of the trumps, which is now on the Martin's
Universal Mysteries, yeah.
Universal Mysteries in the file section. I uploaded it, and what Tony did was he found the kernel of the GD Tarot as planned out. This was the planning phase. I hadn't actually gone into it at that particular point, but they've listed what they wanted to do. Now, the tarot at that stage that he found is very similar to that of Oswald Wirth, who I think it was Papus got him to do some tarot cards.
Yeah.
I don't know about the year. You have to. I don't know the year this particular paper was made, and I don't know. I'm not too sure of the year when Wirth drew his cards up. but I'm betting around about the mid-1880s. And if you put these two side by side, you will see they're very, very similar. They're not identical by any stretch, but they are similar in patterning. And that's very important. And as a result of that, people had Mathers had the entire tarot layout done. Yeah, nobody found this paper to start with. People had done books on the tarot before, but nobody found it except Tony. And he's a master of that. He just turns up papers where people just don't get. That's his forte, or one of his fortes anyway. Oddly enough, there was another tarot book called, was it Rising Dawn or something, on the tarot, and the information that they had.
New Dawn, yeah.
New Dawn, that's right. And the information that they got from the tarot was this piece of paper was sitting on the shelf right next to where they took their stuff out of. So, and Tony just did the extra 9 yards, and as a result of that, he chemicals this paper. And this was the first overall aspect of the trumps that you will find in the GD vein. The similarity to Worth, well, it could be coincidental, there's a synchronicity aspect there, or it could be, there could be something a little bit more to it than that. I won't say a direct copy, but one could have copied from Worth and just changed something to suit themselves. But to know that with any certainty, you would have to find out when Worth actually drew the cards up and how old this particular document is. So it's only a supposition at this time. It needs to be further investigated.
It's quite interesting, though, that there's no other place in the system except through the initiations, obviously, where the major arcana are described like that in detail, not in ritual N or O or P or any of the book T parts. It's been left out, right? The minor arcana are in there. And then to see this document resurface, obviously, is super important. One thing, though, you mentioned about the time of when it came out. I think that's an interesting topic in itself, because there's often mention of the 6-5 initiation, right? That was found. And the 6-5, some people call it the AO 6-5, which I think is wrong, because the cards, like I mentioned before, right, justice and strength, they're not even reversed yet, which means that 6-5 is definitely early GD. In fact, it would be earlier than that 3-8 document where the switch is made. And this document that you referred to, that Tony found, also has the reversal already made, which means the 6-5 would be before those two documents actually came out.
You calling it a 6-5, I think, was a bad error of judgment. Look, I don't want to really get into too much on the 6-5, but we've got to address it. The situation with the reversal of the images was very, very simple, really. It was a matter of, as you line the cards up in the Hebrew letters, you've just got a sequence, and the sequence is numeric. And all they did was they just, when they lined the Hebrew letters up with the cards, they found the numerical sequence was out of whack. And so what they did, they just simply reversed them. Simple as that.
So we've established that the GD is pretty central to not the GD, the tarot is pretty central to the GD system. It obviously connects to everything from the Kabbalah to alchemy to astrology to all the other subsystems. So let's take some of the cards, right? We find them on the paths and on the Sephirot, on the Tree of Life. We find them having astrological meanings, right, with planets and signs spread throughout the entire minor arcana. Now, when you're looking at the cards and working with them, where do you put your priority when it comes to the meaning of a card? Because obviously a lot of times the meanings can even conflict. If you're overlapping some of the Kabbalah, some of the astrology, and then some of the basic imagery, a lot of them might not necessarily always line up.
Okay, well, I'll just tell you what happened to me. I think that's the easiest way to do it, because I did so many. From 1988 to 1994, I worked in the Wellington markets as a tarot reader 3 days a week, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That's where I meet Tony. And how it happened was that I familiarised myself with the Wang deck, and I'd studied the Wang deck, but nothing really prepared me for going in and doing the tarot from a divinatory viewpoint. Now, I knew the cards pretty well, but when I sat down there and did the divinatory aspect, I pushed all of that to one side, and I would put the card in front of me, and the card would trigger a response in me, so I knew what it meant. So the card was just a trigger aspect for some internal dynamic
Mm-hmm.
to bring out the meaning of the actual thing, and that's how I worked as a tarot reader. I didn't sit there and work my way through about half a dozen things that they actually did. I looked solely at what happened, and that there's an image, the image triggers, it hits the site, the response comes out, I tell them what I see. It's that simple.
So in divination, definitely use the impressions from the overall, from everything in the card with your own intuition and combine that together.
That's what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
It's supposed to stimulate, produce a stimulus within you to understand the cards better. And what happened was that when I started doing tarot reading, I think my clairvoyant faculties increased. I think any reader worth his salt would say exactly the same thing. And I was really, I just look at a card. Sometimes I could look at a card upside down. It was really crazy. It was an easy, natural thing for me, and I just was able to do it. Why I can do it and some people can't, I really don't know. That's up to them. But I was fully aware of the internal mechanisms of the card, but I hadn't written the large tarot book at that particular point. What I wanted to do was, when I did the tarot cards, let's see, it's the book as such, and it's not the latest edition. I haven't got the latest edition actually. I haven't sent it to me yet. So if Oliver Rathbone's out there, Oliver, please send me the latest edition. So what the story was, that I wanted to find out more about the divinatory aspect. Now the divinatory aspect on a single card, I'd have one card, like the Wheel of Fortune, for example.
Right.
Now the Wheel of Fortune generally is a good card, but it means change. But the big issue that I found was that I had one person come into me and he wanted to know, he had a terrible situation coming up and everything was going well and I got the Wheel of Fortune. And I said, well, things are going to change for the better. He said, it can't, it's so bad. I said, well, what do you think change is about? It's not standing still. And he didn't want to believe me, but that was it. Did he come back? No, I've no idea what happened to them. But I used to do 70 readings, roughly 70 readings over a 3-day period. And it was really
70 in a 3-day period. Wow.
Yeah, well, it was. I do, you know, I quit my job as a civil servant, or in New Zealand. What happened that way? They started getting rid of a lot of departments. So what they do, they go for restructuring. They'd centralise and decentralise, and they get rid of all the periphery. Then they go for the whole process again. Just a matter of saving money. Anyway, half the country, I think, got their papers, and I was one of them. I said, okay, well, the house is paid off, so I'll just go down and do tarot cards. And I enjoyed it. I really did. 3 days a week, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I met a whole lot of people. I had a lot of fun, and I enjoyed the thing. Of course, when you get the flu or something like that, it's not too hot. I was sitting down there with herbs a couple of times, herbal teas. But generally, it was quite good. So I enjoyed the process. And it gave me a chance to experiment and see the layers in the divinatory aspect of the tarot. I could see the layer aspect of it, which you couldn't see under normal. If you did normal divination just now and then, the layers wouldn't be so prolific. But when you're doing, say, a month, when you're doing 280 readings a month, and they're professional readings, you really have to be very, very sharp within your gut to a certain extent, and you have to be very, very acute in what you see. We had many instances come down. I remember one time one Chinese guy came in to see me, and he asked me about a business in Hong Kong. I said, don't tell me what it is, it's a business. What's your problem? He said, well, I want to know, is there any issues with it? I said, yeah, you've got water all over the place, it's going to cause all major problems, and you've got to do shipping. He said, oh, thank you. Anyway, about a month later, this guy comes over in a suit, and I was sitting down there doing my readings, and he said, can you come over to the hotel, of course, there was a big international hotel. I said, why? I'm in the middle of doing readings. He said, how much do you make in a day? I told him. He said, I'll give you twice that. I said, you got a customer. So I just, halfway up, and I said, I'll follow you over. So I went over to the hotel, and there was a room full of about 5 Chinese people in suits. And he wanted me to bring the cards over. And he gave me the money straight up on the front. I said, thank you, put it in the wallet. And he said, we have questions. I said, go for it. I sat there for about 2 hours answering their questions, looking at different areas. And it turns out that my tarot forecasting about this particular guy, he just bought a company and they were about to build in some parts of Hong Kong. That was a real issue. And he felt there was something wrong but didn't know what it was. And so he was just taking a walk, went across the road, saw me just on the off chance that he wanted a tarot reading. Anyway, so we went back to Hong Kong, spoke to his people, and on a hunch or a whim, decided he wanted to investigate some of the properties that they're doing. And sure enough, there was a very, very bad situation with water, movable things, and there was also a time frame in it, which he could get out of the deal. And as a result of that, he got out of the deal. They didn't give him everything. There was a time frame of about 6 weeks or something where he had to go over things or whatever it was. I can't remember exactly. So I sat down there and did readings for all these particular gentlemen, and they produced eats. There were people coming to eats and beer. By the time I finished, I was as pissed as a news. Here was a beer. Mr. Pat, have a beer. Thank you very much. And I even got to the time we're doing on horse racing. He was asking me about horse racing. At that stage, I'd had about 16 beers, you know. I thought, Jesus, I'm going to get killed when I get back to the market. Of course, it'll kill me. But the thing was that in the end, he came back a third time, and he just stopped and he said, that horse, it won 3 times. Then it died. And he said I couldn't remember actually what I'd said at that point. And apparently I told him, I said, if the horse comes out, you'll only have a short time with it. You'll be very successful, but no more than a month. After that, it's hopeless. And he said, I insured it very much. So he did okay out of it, he told me. So he was back and forth for a few weeks. So that was just some of the funny instances I had with tarots and divination.
Just before this VODCAST, you were sitting across the table from me doing a spread, doing a reading, and with your own deck. How good does it feel to do it with your own cards?
Sort of weird.
It occurred to me, that's when it hit me. I saw you sitting there doing the reading, like, right, those are his cards, and so yeah, I just thought I'd throw that in there.
Yeah, it's sort of weird. It had taken 30 odd years, such a long process, to actually get a coloured deck that even now when I see it, I've got to pinch myself to think that we've done it.
It was a beautiful deck.
Yeah, we got the right backing for a change too on the back of it, which is that backing that you see there is what everyone gets when they go in and do a tarot. And it's in the Crowley books as well, and that's the main face of the Ankh, which there's a whole lot of association to it to a certain extent, but that's what happened. And none of these cards, even Crowley's or Wang's, have the backing of that on it. And, so what they do is they try to put their own interpretation on it, and that's the meditational background, and that's the sort of an overview of the tarot. Everything's included within that to a certain extent.
The key. So obviously, putting this whole thing together, where would you say it has the most influences from? The GD designs, the SM, obviously Falcon Mathers, a mix.
Oh gee, this is going to take some time. Let's look at the GD tarot. Now the GD tarot, the one that Tony had originally, this was a temporal construct. It hadn't been activated by then. It was, in my opinion. And when the GD cards were put in Book T, they were elaborated on. Now, if you have a look at aspects of Book T, they're still talking about the knaves and they're still talking about the fool in the old terms. But anyway, so when Falcon, I'm going to have to separate things. The GD cards really were explained in ritual really up to about up to the portal, I think. Yeah. Beyond that, you really never got too much about it. It was just whatever you thought it was.
And from the great 6-5 explanation.
And let's go. What Mathers did, he put into the so-called 6-5 ritual. So the extrapolation of those cards that Tony found, the higher-ups, are included within the so-called 6-5 ritual. And I say so-called with good reason. the 6/5 ritual that you have really is an elaboration of the portal. They must have done that years before, and what they did was they just took that in a whole unit and just said, okay, we're going to make it a 6/5. There's no beginning, there's no middle, and there's no end to it. It's a terrible ritual. The paths are okay up to a point, but there's no introduction to it. There's no floor plan. I didn't give the floor plan out in the Whare Ra 6/5 as well. That was only done later. It's what they have it now, but not before. So that's held back. I can understand that from a public, when you're publishing it from a publication viewpoint. But when you're in the order itself, you should have a floor plan. It should be all laid out, and it wasn't. And to think that Mawina Mathers went through that and they called it a 6/5 is really just takes the cake. And I couldn't believe what I was reading. It was a draft document, in my opinion, for what it's worth. They had to put a whole front in it, had to reorientate the middle side and the end part of it. And also get the diagram sorted out as well. There's hardly any diagrams in the darn thing.
But let's come back to your deck. Mm-hmm. Does it have more Mathers influence, more Falcon, or is it a combination of both?
I'm just about to get there. Thanks for reminding me. So when Falcon got the GD Tarot, now the GD Tarot at that point in time was not given out as far as I know. What happened was that most of the tarot cards in the Golden Dawn, I think there's something in regard to his book, the big yellow one, where it states that if you use another deck, just put the frame around in the colour of the colour scales, just around the edge, and that's pretty much. It gives you a rough idea of what he was going to do. So they're all using probably French and Spanish and Italian decks with a colour frame around it. And so when you start looking at Book T again with different eyes, they're giving out, there's a couple of divination aspects on the tarot there. There's about one big long divinatory thing which goes on and on and on. And the trouble is that the cards they're talking about are not the Golden Dawn cards. They're the European deck. And the European deck and the Golden Dawn deck, they have very, very similar aspects, but they're not identical. So the meaning alters slightly with the deck. The image holds the meaning. If the image changes, the meaning will start to change as well. There are core components in it, but they're not always the same. And this is the problem people got. They think they can take a deck of tarot cards and do any way they want using the same meaning. That's not true. The image of the card will expand and contract the meanings to suit the frame that you're working through. Anyway, so what happened was that, putting that aside, Falcon added to the Golden Dawn tarot cards. He wanted to get a Golden Dawn deck out. Wade had already done it. I think that was the motivating factor. So if Wade did it, Falcon wanted to do it. And what he did was he added the additional trumps to it. He was Tony added. He added the trumps to the Golden Dawn version, his version of the trumps.
Oh, he modified the trumps.
Yeah, modified the trumps.
Yeah.
See, Mathers never produced them. We had that one slim paper, but there was no production on what these trumps were. There were some papers given out in the THAM, which really were good in a sense, but I felt that some of the descriptions on some of these cards were not great. The THAM paper had had all the planetary cards, which went a little bit further, but Falcon didn't use those at all. He used his own way of looking at it. And he completed the deck, he got it out. He changed some of the wording of the descriptions. There was a few there. There was the 8 of discs, and Falcon put all the white roses at the top rather than at the bottom, which totally defeated the meaning of what Mathers was trying to get through. And I agree with Mathers in this case, and I swapped them back the way they were supposed to. Wang didn't do that. When I spoke to Regardie about Wang and his deck, that's right, that's that one here, just show them one. That's the proper GD way. The Falcon version had the white roses at the top. Now you can see the influence of colour. When you look at the colour, the white roses are a standout, and they're all at the bottom, meaning that you can get along with material pursuits, but not the higher. which means things are limited to a certain extent. But when you get up to the higher levels, that means that everything's in the higher and there's no results in the bottom. So a lot going on, nothing on the bottom. This is the exact opposite of what this card represents. So Wang got to the point where he said he made changes to it. That was one of them. He stuck with the SM version, and he really some of his colouring's not bad. Let's be face it, you can't throw a blanket over the entire deck of Wang's deck, because I used it for many years and loved it. I thought it was a great deck, but I also knew it was lacking in a lot of things. Now Westcott was talking to Falcon about the tarot and what he wanted to do and increase it. So Westcott and Falcon were talking back and forth, or writing back and forth. Now both of them died within a very short time of each other, if memory serves me correctly. Tony can correct me on this. And one of the things I said, well, what did they talk about? And Jack said, he said, the only thing that I know is that there was a change going on in the court cards. And of course, when we have a look at the Falcon court cards, which are absolutely terrible, they've taken much of the meaning out and changed directions. And I said, this is ridiculous. Anyway, Bob Gilbert came round to the party, and when I was living in Hastings, Bob sent me copies of Westcott's court cards. Yeah, I hadn't had a chance to. Darcy Kunz has put a book out on that. I think I haven't seen the darn thing yet, but I had Westcott's court cards there. And I said, well, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it the Westcott way. Obviously, Westcott was a player in developing the imagery of the court cards, and so we used what Westcott had as a background. Where he got this information from, I do not know. Is it just Westcott on his own, or did someone tell him? I don't know. But they went for the mother, father, son, daughter aspect, or mother, father changes around a little bit when you get the. I think Crowley said this best. He said, "The knight marries a queen who has a daughter who marries a prince," or something along those lines. And that was a simple way of putting it, and really, it really works well. As you can see, on a comparison with this particular deck, there are some changes in it when you compare it to the Wang deck.
With the sigils of the scales.
Yeah, the shape, the sigils of the scales are one, and there's other aspects as well. And so Falcon reduced the formula of Westcott in the court cards to something a little bit more easier or more palatable. When I redid the cards, I said, no, we're going to put the full formula back in. And the full formula seems to go more along with what Mathers wrote at first glance. And that was interesting. And you got a lot of symbolism. You got heads and child's heads and horses' heads in certain positions, and not just on the knees. It's where the heads are positioned on the body, where they're positioned in the card. And you've got to look at all of this into consideration, and I opted to put that in. So at Whare Ra, they didn't use the same court cards as I'm using, but the Golden Dawn under Westcott at that time, Mathers did. Now Westcott tried to get Falcon to change it. He agreed with the change, as far as I know from what Jack said. And that's about all Jack knew, and this was information much later in the day. So really, what Falcon did, he had a complete deck by that stage. He had all the court cards done, which he redid. He had all the minor arcana done, which is pretty straightforward. And now at that stage, we don't see any real drawings of how the minor arcana were done. But they obviously didn't suddenly spring out of the ground. So I think there was some work done on those in the early period, but we don't have any paper to back that up. I really don't know. Tony again would probably know more about that than I would. Well, what you got here is two decks. You've got the Falcon deck, which is now the Golden Dawn deck, and it's not really the AO deck. If you wanted to do the AO deck, what you would have to do was get my cards, and then you would go in and you would go to my inner order book, inner order teachings book, and go to the section on the tarot trumps and the tarot trumps and the planets. Once you've got that, then you get an idea of how the planetary aspects of the cards. The rest are just, you can go back to book T as they originally did it, and also the original thing. So essentially, you could probably go back to Oswald Worth deck and just put a few notes of archangel names here and there and a slight change, and you pretty well got the AO deck if you really want it. But the Falcon deck, as it stands at the moment, is the important one. And Wang, to his credit, followed what Rigardi told him. Rigardi said that Wang sucked my brains dry on that. He said he wouldn't leave me alone, just kept asking questions all the time. Well, Rigardi, to be honest, Francis' ability on tarot was not his main focus point. I found that out, but that's my view.
So funnily enough, all the GD and AO purists out there are using, most likely they're all using a Falcon deck, whether it's Wang's or Cicero's or even yours, are much more Falcon influenced than original GD.
Well, you can, if you want to do it by card numbering, you've probably got something like, I think probably about 12 or 13 cards that are new, and the rest of the cards, 60 plus or 50 something plus cards are really the main frame of the card situation. So really, the Falcon influence is minuscule compared to the original Golden Dawn.
Right.
But what he did was with the deck, that's another story entirely. I had my doubts about the divinatory side of the Falcon deck when I was doing divination. But to my utter astonishment, I think, well, this doesn't work. If I go back and get rid of the Wayne deck and go back and do the Weight deck, which I did many years before, and I found they started to work. Something triggered a response again in me. It's what was a triggering viewpoint, and that was the triggering viewpoint was the actual cards. So you have all these variations on the card themes. Then when you look at the aspects of the cards, then you've got the very higher up aspects like the convoluted forces, which is a massive complexity of card and astrology. And when you start studying that, you then bring the cards into that and into some sort of an alignment. It's very interesting. That's probably one of the reasons I think, looking at that particular card, the Lovers card with Perseus and Andromeda, when you start looking at the star systems, you'll see, hold it up for a minute, I'll look at the divinatory side of it. And with the divinatory side of this particular card, it's the Lovers people coming together, but in alchemy it's separation. It's a separational viewpoint. Now I'm bringing in another separate layer here of how one would view it from an alchemical viewpoint. So what happens here is that the essence is entrapped in the stone and it is released through some sort of an aerial vapor. That's what you've got there within that. And that's a separation process, which is what the alchemical meaning of this card is.
This is a beautiful innovation from Falcon, because even the original GD one would have been just a classic marriage with the...
Well, it's a separation from alchemy and the Igra. But there's another aspect to this card as well. When you take the myth, now the myth comes into it. Now the myth takes Perseus and Andromeda and they go to the heavens and are immortalized. So there's a higher aspect to the card. So it's a rescue, penetration, extraction, and immortality, all in one separate card. And the separation process, the alchemical separation process, is not a standard process. It means something has been extracted. For example, I had a problem years ago when I was reading this about someone wanting to get their child away from their daughter away from the parent, and they asked me would it be successful, and the answer was yes. And what happened was that the police came in and took the child away from the parents, and they went to another part of New Zealand and lived there. And that's just one example. I don't know the ins and outs of it other than the generalities of it. But so you have all of that coming through the cards. So you've got to look at the alchemical viewpoint, meaning one thing, and you've got to look at the divinatory viewpoint, meaning another. Now the alchemical meaning gives you an additional flavour to go through. So you know that when lovers come together, it's after conflict. Conflict has to occur. It's not a happy marriage of everyone coming together. It is ultimately, but not in the beginning. So you've got conflict in the beginning, a bit of a problem, and at the very end, if you follow the myth through, the myth takes it beyond everything. They're in the stars and a happy relationship. So you've got a union occurring through conflict to get a decent result. And you put a time frame to that when you ask the question. So that's all within the that particular card.
Even from the path, from the point of view of the Kabbalah, the fact of this path being between Binah and Tiferet brings a whole other set of interesting meanings as well. So,
By Zayn the sword.
yeah. So obviously, so your deck has a lot of similarities, but many differences with other Golden Dawn decks out there. But one really big differentiating factor, which, as you pointed out, Crowley had done right maybe more than anyone else, is the coloring.
Oh God, yeah.
Let's talk about coloring of your deck, contrasted with what Crowley did, and maybe with what's missing from every other Golden Dawn deck out
Okay, well, initially, my focus on colour really came from Jay Taylor, who was a colour nut. He was so embraced in colour. Tony referred to being Jack thought of eccentric in that particular area, which he was, but he's still a force to be reckoned with. But colour was his main focus points. And so I knew it was important to Jack, I didn't know how. And so what I actually did was I got very involved with that. And Chris as well at that particular point, because she was an artist, and colour and the colour wheels were important to her as well. So what we had to do was we looked at the colour scales. We used the Whare Ra ones. We didn't use the Crowley ones or the other ones. Everyone had a slightly different take on the colour scales. Believe me, they change this on a regular basis. So don't get too upset if you get one set of scales saying this and another set of scales saying that. So we used the Whare Ra ones, and what we did was we renamed some of the colours, which is in our tarot book. Yeah, and so Mrs. Falcon did a paper about 1925, I think, on the tarot. And in this paper, she had said that the trumps are made up of the four parts. Yeah, and then you would then have additional input from the other trees as well coming into the minor arcana, although she didn't elaborate too much on that. She just stuck with the part with the clouds. Yeah, it's an interesting one. So what happened then was that when we started using the Wang deck, we started doing a comparative study on the. See, technically, you're supposed to have the four colours of the paths and their complementaries. Sometimes you can bring in extras, which I did, which Crowley picked up. Again, Crowley picked it up in 777, where he saw the additional information come through. Now, that was done in 1925. In the war, I think it was it the end of the war? Just after the war, I think. Crowley got Frieda Harris to do the top deck, and he did what Mrs. Falcon said. Now, Mrs. Falcon and Crowley were corresponding with each other, believe it or not. Now, one of Falcon's sons, I don't know which one, may have been Neville, I think his name was, or someone could correct me on that. I think he was ended up living in Guernsey, or in the Channel Islands. And he was a devotee of Crowley, and Falcon never liked that very much, but he got that was his focus. And so Mrs. Falcon and Crowley actually corresponded. And the one who told me this was Grant. But when I pressed Grant to give me to say
Kenneth Grant,
yeah. When I pressed him to give me some more information on this, he said, "Well, it's been so long ago, I can't remember." Essentially, so there was a correspondence between them, and I'd be willing to bet the colour scales I mentioned. I don't know with any certainty. I'm guessing. My guesses have been proved wrong before, but some have been proved right as well.
So it could be that Crowley was influenced by Miss Falcon on the colouring.
With the yes, I do. I think her paper that came out was very good. Now you've got to remember, this paper was in regard to his book, and Crowley had regard to his book, where he had condensed everything down, and so that was the one point. Now, when Frieda Harris did the cards, she did what Mrs. Falcon said. She put the four primary colours of the paths of the four trees all together, plus the complementaries, and she did it that way, and she worked it through. And also in the minor arcana, she used that as well. So in the minor arcana, you might have a card. You would have two things in the minors. You would have a planet and a sign from a single tree. So if it was, so what happened was that the background was the sign, and the planetary image was the implement. and you put that. That's what she did, but she reversed it sometimes when the thing wasn't right. But if you go through the top deck and you start looking at backgrounds and using the 4 trees, you'll see that it fits in with the colour scales. But there's a reversal process. When she felt the colours weren't totally accurate, she reversed them around.
But she actually showed it to Regardi, like you were saying in a previous podcast, and you showed it to him on the wall, compared the cards.
Yeah, he said he didn't know that. Well, it wasn't you. Mrs. Falcon had laid it out. You just have to follow the process through and not just read a piece of paper and say, oh, that's it, full stop, don't worry about it. You have to rationalise the rest of it. Anyway, later I found out that some people had done the tarot cards, they'd used the 4 trees at 6-5 and they'd done the background work. Not all of them did this, but some of them did. Percy didn't do it. He had like Wayne's deck. But there was one other person. I asked Bethany Jones this. She was in Thibeault as well. She was one of the former chiefs. And I asked her a couple of questions about certain things, and this was one of them, and she said yes. She said, but not everyone does it. She said if they don't understand the colour scales, they won't put the on what they're used for. She said they won't put the backing in the minor arcana. She did, I think. I think she did, or she knew about it. I can't remember exactly which. So the cards that I've got now in the minor arcana have got the 4 colour scales. So if you want to see the 4 colour scales in action in the GD rather than 4 single trees, you've got them in the tarot cards. And it's an example of one of them there. You've got the planet there, which is a main focus of Mars, got the planetary influence. So you've got all of this coming through. There's another one as well. You'll see my notes on the top of the cards there. What happened was I asked them to put the meanings of the cards on the top, and somehow I got lost in the translation because we had some issues with the tarot cards, and there's about 3 or 4 different people working on them anyway. It just got lost in the translation. So when you get the cards, put the names on the top. I do. Just use a biro. It doesn't detract from them at all. Even though I know what the cards mean by looking at them, I still find that. Now, getting back to the GD tarot cards, the meaning of these cards, I've gone into the website that we're on, Martin's Forum. I've tried to explain how these things work. Where you have a tree, for example. Now, Wayne got a few things wrong here. The descriptions in the book TR, the roses are white. And rightly so, because the roses are white because you've gone through the transmission from the blackening to the whitening phase. So there's an alchemical aspect of that as well. So if you got the purified rose, white rose, but Wayne took a totally different viewpoint and made all the roses red and made them minuscule, where I've made the roses pretty much the exact size as what they were at Whare Ra from memory. So they're white. That's one of the major changes. Now how it works is that when the roses are associated with discs, it's one of them up there. When the roses are associated with discs, you'll probably find that when everything's in balance, there's no drop roses, everything is perfect. But when there's more disc than needs to be, it's a plain disruption. As a result of that disruption, the petals of the rose fall away. And when you have potential growth as well as growth, you'll see the little white bud turn out of the rose. You see that in the disc. So you line all the 10 of discs up. Yeah. See that one there, and you have a good look at it. You'll see the rose, you see the buds. That shows potential growth. So not only is your cup full at the moment, but you're getting potential additional growth on top of it. So it goes more into that as well. So there's a storyline with that. I put that up on the forum, what the storyline is and how to use it. And it's also included in my tarot book. So if you look carefully at the paragraphs in the book, you'll see where I start to talk about what was before and now, what you've got and what's going to come afterwards. And you can go through each card like that and just write it up. It's really an exercise in itself. And if you're in a Golden Dawn temple and you want people to do more on tarot cards and how they work, I'd suggest you pick that thing out of my book, have a look at it. If you don't like it, write your own up. There's not a problem there. And study them from that viewpoint. So I can go through all 4 suits, and I can make it linear, and I can explain how the swords come together, how you can grab them with so many hands, but you can't grab them with another hand, and how the water comes through the cups when you've got too much water. Things fracture, cause a bit of a problem. It's like that. So there's a fluidity there. It just flows beautifully. So Matthew certainly did his job, or whoever, on that fluidity. That was taken, of course, from the Marseille deck. as far as it goes.
Well, there's nothing in the GD that really bridges everything as well as the tarot does. It really does bring alchemy and astrology and Kabbalah all into a synthesis.
Yes, Case recognised this. He knew it. And so he decided to skip the ritual out and just go straight to the tarot. You can do that if you want. But if you want someone to actually work through the system, you've got to work it through the phase of divinatory, meditation, and ritual. Case still kept ritual, though he kept it in the background. But you really need to look at that. So all of them knew that the tarot was central to the theme. And the tarot cards at Whare Ra were all black and white, with the exception of one exception, I think. It was the Jupiter card, the Wheel of Fortune. That was the only one that wasn't. And as a result of that, they were quite large. They were about like a small poster, and not small and tiny. When I asked Patricia Beeman about that, I said, we had big posters up for our tarot cards, and we were showing Mr. Ray. She said, what are they for? Well, I said, whoa. I said, well, don't you have those on the altar? She said, no, we just use a tarot deck, Wang's tarot deck.
Wow.
I thought, good God. Well, anyway, I'm probably having a shot at Pat here, but I had to get that one out. I was stuck in my core for a while. But so they were doing the small cards where I said, no, they're quite large ones. Now, Rigardi knew this, but he didn't tell Pat. And he only, best as I can recall, he only turned up to Pat's temple twice. Now, she was his girlfriend, and he was teaching her. And I think I mentioned this before, that there was Laura Jennings, Peter York, and Pat Beeman all started the temple in LA together. And to the best of my knowledge, Rigardi turned up twice, and he said to them was, look at the ritual. He said, oh, you're not the bloody funeral, start walking. So when I turned up, everyone was almost running around, chasing each other in the circumambulation. I said, no, it doesn't that. So he never taught Pat at ritual, because how could you teach Pat at ritual when, in Golden Dawn ritual, when you're on your own? He didn't take her through and do it all. He made her read the book, work it out, and work the structure out for herself. Some of it she did, some of it she did not. Now, I'm not trying to lay it all on Pat here, but I'm trying to say that what you got over there from reading books and not getting the full instruction, it leaves a hell of a lot of gaps, and those gaps can be filled in by useful information or completely ignored. So it's up to the individual what they want to do.
By the way, a lot of people watching this probably don't know what the name Patricia Beeman is. Do you want to refer to her?
Well, she was Rigardi's girlfriend. Almost on the first day he turned up, and we turned up, we met them in Wellington in August of '83. He was apologising to me for her within about 10 minutes of meeting, I think.
Was she known by another name?
One of Christi Astris.
Chris Monastra, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, obviously the GD the tarot is super important to the GD system. This tarot deck, I believe, from what you've just said, is basically a synthesis of the core of the GD deck, with the brilliant innovations from Falcon, integrating Westcott's court cards and obviously Sigils of the Scales, and a much more structured coloring system than the Thoth deck. So it really brings all the best elements.
The Thoth deck, if you put it as a standalone, the Thoth deck will win on every occasion, as far as a deck of beauty, of strength, and things along those particular areas. But it really, while it's a beautiful deck and an incredibly well done deck, and suits the Crowley type version, but there's still, most of the top deck is GD orientated. There's no question of that, especially the court cards. But when you look at those particular ones in the top deck, it'll win in every case. It'll be the better deck. But in the Golden Dawn, you're given a certain deck and you've got to work with it. This is one of the most interesting cards you'll find in the Golden Dawn deck. Now, this is the Wake call this the Drowned Giant, Polybutes. That's one of the aspects of it, where the water would come in during the daytime and go out later. And he gets enlightenment at the end. That's why there's a white light there. So illumination comes through. And that also comes through in the whitening process, which you see in the roses as well. So there's a throwback to it. There's a little bit of hidden of alchemical symbolism in this. You can't get away from it. the alchemical symbolism and images is there. Now, what Mathers was talking about, he was talking about the bark of Osiris. He said you would turn the card up and you would have it halfway, and then it'll be the bark of Osiris. Now, if you have a look at some of the hidden, I think there's a deck. Tony, was it Tony? I think he uncovered this. Or if not, I apologise. He found like an arc and one of Waite's decks, and that was the bark of Osiris as well. And they had just a long bark, and you turn the thing side on, and it's exactly the same. The bark was vertical instead of horizontal. You got to turn it hard. When you turn it horizontal, you got it. So that was a completely different meaning to what you get with the Falcon card, with the Polybeats and the Drowned Giant. So, but Waite changed his mind. He had a view of what he thought the Hangman was at 1 year, and later, when he produced his own deck, his own secret deck, when you have a look at the Hangman, I think the bark of Osiris is floating around there somewhere. You just got to turn it the right way to get it level. So there was all variants within the tarot cards. The tarot card, if you want to know more about the tarot card, all you got to do is sit down there and divine it. We've got some spreads there, simple spreads. My best spread is a 7-card spread, which I've got in the tarot book.
That was going to be my next question, actually. What's your advice to beginners? Anyone who's starting out with the tarot, what's the best way to get into it?
Practice. If you can't practice on people, practice on news events that you know are going to come up in a short time. Practice on events and write it down in a journal. So there's a major event coming through. Could be, you could go public, just a public one if you want it, and test yourself. See how you go. That's a good way of finding out. You can also do it with your own self. Should you go there? Should you meet so and so? Should you not meet this person? Should you take that job? Should you take one of the things with tarot readings I do either or. Some people come up and say, can I do this or can I do that? Well, I said, it's very simple. You do a reading for one, do a reading for the other, compare the readings, see which is the best choice. So you take the simplest approach in what you do. The meditation with the tarot is always good. I've never one for path working. I think if you're going to do meditation, do it on your own. I don't want someone else's influence coming into me and influencing me when I do astral work. I want to see what I see and not have my neighbours tell me what I see, because that's really just not my cup of tea. Never has been. So I really don't think too much of it. But anyway, so the Falcon deck is really the one true Golden Dawn deck, where the reality is it's not quite the true Golden Dawn deck, because the true Golden Dawn deck has never really been formulated. One other point too, Carnegie Dixon, who was I think 7-4 in the AO, I think became 9-2. If memory serves me rightly, again Tony would know more about this than me. You know, his wife got to 8-3, so I put him at 9-2. He was using the Falcon Tarot cards, and he was using the colouring scheme of the AO. What a lot of people don't realise that when you get into the Bristol Temple post-war, when Carnegie Dixon came on board for that period from about the late 40s to about 54, I think, when he died, somewhere around there. It was an AO temple in many respects as far as the inner order went. The outer order is pretty much the same, but the one couple of Wrens, when they wanted their 6-5, they never got it through Mrs. Carnegie Dixon. She sent them to I think they got their 6-5. That's right. They were coming up for the 7-4. I can't remember which. My memory's going these days. It's not as good as what it once was. I've got too many. The database is getting a little bit full at times, and the infrastructure's not working as well.
Well, I've been seeing Carnegie Dixon's tarot deck and Frank Salt's cards and just about everything else out there. Your deck really, really brings everything together. Like I said, some of the GD elements, the Falcon elements, the colouring is just next. Yeah,
the Frank Salt's got a tarot deck. I'll go and get it. Paul Martin's doing it.
It's a brilliant deck. Well, I guess I should use this time to do a little bit of publicity for Pat. It's not his something he likes to focus on. But if you want this deck or this book, the proper latest edition, just go to orderofthegoldendawn.com, click on the resource tab, and in the resource tab, click publications. You've actually got links there to acquire both the tarot deck and the latest edition of the Magical Tarot of the Golden Dawn.
Okay,
so I did that while you were gone.
Here's Frank Salt's version of the cards. That's his colouring of it. Try and get it right. Yeah, got to get it reversed. It's a bit like driving a helicopter.
Except the wing one there.
Yeah, I got the wing one in the middle as a comparison. You can see that. Yeah. And you can see the angles of the colour. see where the colours of the Sephiroth are there. So anyway, see, that's an example of Franks. That's one. Some more. And finally this one. And there. That's all Frank Salt's version. Yeah, Frank copied these out. I don't think he put the colours himself. I think he copied them as far as I'm aware. But, so you can see some of the colours are different. So I said, I work with David Zedlinski. That's a good name for a tarot deck. We've got Zalewski and Zedlinski. Good God. Very Polish. But what happens is that David put the colours and he put them, didn't do what Wayne did and painted the deck. He put them on through computer analysis. So we had what colours went where. We tried where possible to get rid of flesh colours and put them in, mauve them into the shape of the thing where we could. So there are some differences there, but we couldn't do it with every card, but we did with most of them. You'll also notice the court cards that they're very, very painted colours. The gnomes and things are in the faces of the discs are all painted green, and the sylphs are painted yellow, and the fire elements are painted slightly red. Yeah, there's a slightly red taint to it. So that's an added bonus. So we tried to get rid of the colouring. The blue there, we get the blue cards. Yeah, that's the undines coming through there. So that's why they were painted like they were. But I think you've got to start divining with the cards to get used to them. Yeah, they give you archetypes, and archetypes give you pigeonholes in your mind, which shift things around and collectively bring them and push out when you need to. Right, anything else you got?
No, that's good stuff. I mean, we went into how the GD made its way, I keep saying that, the tarot made its way into the GD, decided sort of influences that happened there, some of the main changes.
Well,
and really went quite a bit into your deck, and I mean, we can wrap it up unless there's anything last thing you want to add.
You'll find different tarot decks being out on the market classed as GD. Well, they're not, in the strictest sense of the word. They really, if you're going to class them as GD, you've got to look at A, the original, or B, the Falcon version. And you've got to make your own decision on what you think it represents a GD deck. It has to represent what's in the rituals. That's how it works. That's it.
Thanks, Pat. Really, really good one. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you all on the next one.